As announced, Nigerian youths were out this Wednesday to commemorate the first anniversary of the shooting of peaceful #EndSARS protesters at the Lekki tollgate on October 20, 2020. In Lagos, there was a long convoy of cars decked with the Nigerian flag. Arise correspondent Shaitan Atigare has the details.
It's been a year since the historic EndSARS protest, a youth-driven anti-police brutality demonstration that took place across Nigeria. A car procession in memory of the lives lost on the 20th of October at the Lekki tollgate was slated to take place today at the same venue between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. However, the early hours of what was meant to be a peaceful drive started with 2 persons being arrested. Despite a ban on protest in Lagos and the heavy presence of armed police personnel at the tollgate, at about 9 a.m., a swarm of cars with the Nigerian flag visibly hoisted approached the tollgate, blasting their horns in unison while singing solidarity songs.
20th of October 2020, armed military men came here, shot down innocent Nigerians that were protesting against police brutality. Today is 1 year after. We are here to honor them, to remember them. That is why we're here.
We have lawyers already on standby. We knew they'd do this. We were ready. And so people are going to get out. Unless they want to arrest all of us, there's nothing they can do. It is your legal right to be able to protest. And people must remember, just here, they killed people, they shot people, people were injured. So anybody that's been picked up, don't worry, we move, we're coming.
Protesting is the right of every Nigerian, and that should never be taken away from us. They are trying to make sure that we are peaceful, and that is what we are. We are nothing but being peaceful. It's just that it's not a fight. The government needs to learn. They need to understand that it's not a fight against the government. Nobody is fighting government. We are demanding for a better government. If you are there to serve us, that should not be a big deal for you.
We must. I'm a youth at heart, but no, fundamentally it's about justice. It's really about justice. And we decided that if we can keep people in cars, we will keep them safe. So they can't say they're on the road, they are causing havoc, but we're here peacefully. And EndSARS protesters, let's not mistake it, were about police brutality. They have nothing to do with criminals who were destroying property. That is not EndSARS protest. The EndSARS protest is about police brutality, period.
As the procession gathered momentum, the attention of security officials was drawn to persons who had showed up with machetes, charms, and other dangerous objects. A move followed closely with canisters of tear gas launched into the crowd. The Commissioner of Police in Lagos State, Hakeem Odumosu, who made an appearance at the tollgate, made no objections about the protest, but said the police was there to ensure the procession isn't infiltrated and remains peaceful.
This place is not where people normally trek. You've seen the place. It's not a marketplace where people coming out to buy and sell. It is only for vehicular movement up and down. So if somebody along that, we discover that some migrants have infiltrated those who organize this protest. Is that right? And I spoke with them. Let us just be on the same synergy.
As the memorial procession comes to a close and the traffic gridlock slowly eases up, the security presence still remains heavy at the Lekki toll gate. However, for how long, only time can tell. Shaitan Atigare, Arise News.
In Abuja, youth also turned out to commemorate the anniversary of the infamous Lekki shooting. Youths in their hundreds marched through the streets of Abuja carrying placards. The protesters gathered at the Unity Fountain where they planned to proceed to the National Assembly. However, they met a brick wall. Heavily armed security officials prevented them from moving beyond the Federal Secretariat complex. The protesters, after a lengthy dialogue with security operatives, were refused any onward movement, but this does not deter them from stating some of their grievances.
We are here to express our disappointments, express our frustration on the situation of things that has been going on in the country. It's becoming very unbearable to live in Nigeria today because of the high cost of living.
Even if you are praised from October 2020 to October today, you will find out that the cost of food, staple food that we have in the country, that families eat every day, has skyrocketed. A lot of young people are leaving the country because they need greener pastures where the government would really take care of them and deliver the dividends of democracy. We wanted to go to the National Assembly, but they have barricaded this place. They don't want us to march and meet with our representatives because our desire was that we wanted the Senate President and any other principal officer of the National Assembly to address young people.
I'm here because of our children that we lost in the Lekki toll gate and Lady K that is in DSS office. They are not criminal. And Mr. Jami, they are not criminal. They are not terrorists. And our boys, we have to remember them, our boys that we lost in the Lekki toll gate. That day too, they fought as a hero and thank God for their life. So, and Lady K too, they should help us free Lady K. She's having an agent mother in the village waiting for her. She's the breadwinner of our family.
Hours later, another group of protesters also gathered at the Unity Fountain for a rally against what it described as the blackmail and incessant attacks on President Muhammadu Buhari, carrying placards that the group says is protesting against campaigns by corrupt Nigerians to instigate citizens against government policies.
We as patriotic Nigerians condemn the constant attacks and blackmail being orchestrated against the administration of our father and leader, President Muhammadu Buhari, as an affront against the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Hence, we shall no longer keep quiet while unscrupulous elements are trying to distract the workaholic appointees of government who have abandoned personal interests for national development. We make bold to say those who have resorted to blackmailing the federal government, believing that the only way to mobilize Nigerians against President Muhammadu Buhari, should know that Nigerians are fully with Mr. President and shall give him mandate again if the Constitution permits.
In Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, youths walked through major roads calling for justice for those allegedly killed at the Lekki toll gate by security agencies in the heat of last year's protest. They took their protest to the government house. They asked government to address institutional decay in human rights protection, bad governance, and lack of commitment from the political class.
We have come in our numbers to let Oyo State government, Seyi Makinde, that it should free Oyo 11. While he discussed at his executive meeting, we heard him, our ears are all ears. Why are you going? You fail to arrest those who killed the police officers. You fail to prosecute the police officer who shot at the leaders of this country. When are we going to hold this?
The government has never provided jobs. We have unemployment everywhere, and the youth go into copywriting, freelancing, crypto, and then you come out to call them criminals. If the society is not working, they should go back to the government. You understand the police salary is not enough. They should go back to the government to increase their salary, to provide whatever they do, and not come back to vent their anger on the youth.
My brother was unlawfully arrested around 3 a.m. on November 13th from his residence, and he has been tagged as a criminal. He has been tagged as those that murdered the police people in Iwo Road here. But my brother was not among them. That is one. And about the women that were shown on TV that they done that murdered, they allowed them to go free. What I'm asking Seyi Makinde should please release my brother. We have suffered enough since November now to this date.
Let me salute the courage of the security operatives first for their courage and endurance, tolerance mostly, in handling this situation. And for Oyo State government believe in rule of law. This particular issue is already in court, and if the judiciary are clamoring for independence of the judiciary, I think there shouldn't be any interference in this matter. We should allow the court to do the needful, and once they come out with the result, everybody will see. And aggrieved party then can go for another redress. So for Oyo State government, believe in rule of law, and that is how we just quiet. And I told them they should exercise patience let the court give their judgment.
All right, welcome back. Very good reports there put together by Shaitan Atigore and part of the Arise crew this morning. Let us talk about this in detail. This did hold, first anniversary. We saw a lot of fireworks yesterday. Tundu, have we learned anything from this experience?
We absolutely have not learned anything. If we even go by our own Arise colleagues here as a barometer, last year, like I said yesterday, Ferdinand and Francis were attacked and the Arise camera was destroyed. This year, we saw Adefemi, Ope, Shaitan under attack. So if that alone is a barometer, we can see. But that's not the only barometer, is it? Other people were arrested. They were assaulted. It still seems as if peaceful protest is criminalized in this country. We can still see from the perspective of Benga Motasha, who we had here, the Honorable Commissioner for Information in Lagos State, and he kept stressing the fact that police officers are human as well. So we can still see that they are still hurt and aggrieved by the attack on them and their colleagues by hoodlums, not by peaceful protesters. So I do actually resent that conflation. It has to be stressed. It was hoodlums that killed police officers, but they are still obviously very embittered by that experience. So those wounds have not healed. We can see what happened in the aftermath of the protests. We can see the fact that a lot of properties were looted, destroyed, businesses were destroyed, homes were burnt to the ground, and people have not recovered financially or psychologically. There was the panel of investigation across the country. Only Lagos State, I believe, has their report ready. Other states have not concluded on their reports. But even the Lagos State has not been published. Their report has not been published. Lagos State has started to pay compensation. But how, pray tell, can you pay compensation and fail to prosecute those who have been found guilty? In order to acknowledge and actually pay a compensation, you are acknowledging the fact that a harm was done, a crime was committed against somebody. So we have to go one step further. It's not all about writing a check, which really does not tend to scratch the surface. I remember one man in particular who was thrown from his from a two-story building in the market, and he spent 30 million naira on treatment. Lagos State compensated him with 7.5 million naira. So when you hear the amount without the context, you think it's generous, but in reality, no, it's not. And then the prosecutions have not happened. Also, back to the police and the well-being of the police, we were all aghast last year when the police officers were killed and their stations were burnt to the ground. Why should our police be in stations that look like that in the first case? Why are their barracks in such a dilapidated condition? Nothing has been done about that. Their salaries have not increased as the president ordered it to be done. That still has not been done. There's just so much. We really have not learned in a whole year. Nothing has changed, really.
Dr. Batim?
Well, clear lessons can be learned from what happened yesterday, specifically in Lagos, in Abuja, in Rivers, Port Harcourt, and also in Ondo, in Akure in Ondo State. Persons trooping out, and also in Ibadan and other parts of the country. The big lesson for government is that you cannot suppress the will of the people. In every situation, the will of the people will prevail. The people will insist on their fundamental human rights under Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution, from Section 35 all the way down to 39 to 45, all those sections dealing with the freedom of thought, freedom of movement, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, and all of that. And that was what we saw on display yesterday. 1 year after, people were, killed, they were brutalized, they were intimidated, some were handed out of the country, bank accounts were, flagged and seized and all of that. But 1 year later, the same people came out and said, you cannot suppress our will. At the heart of the democratic enterprise, or project, if you like, is the will of the people. And we saw in many parts of Nigeria yesterday, the will of the people prevailing. The people speaking up and making the same statement that they made a year ago. That's number one. Number two, I think we should also look at the geographical coloration of the protests. When the National Economic Council directed that states should set up, panels of inquiry, some states refused to do so because they said their own problem was not police brutality. Their own problem was insecurity. If we check those states, yes, 29 states complied. Some people mix it up. They say 30, whatever. But some states declined to set up that panel of inquiry. In some other states, the judicial panel of inquiry was suspended. In the Federal Capital Territory, it was in fact suspended for about 6 months. What does that tell us? That tells us clearly that whatever we have experienced, either in the economy or the political sector or the social sector, that this remains ideologically a divided country. But we can defend that on the basis that, well, people have the right to make their own choices beyond ethnicity, beyond geography. Okay? But for me, that was something that stood out yesterday. Number 3, it was unfortunate that in Lagos, the security agencies again misbehaved. It was not just Arise News journalists that were brutalized or intimidated. Even ordinary citizens were brutalized. There was one Uber driver who was saying, nobody in my family has ever entered this thing. That's the Black Maria, okay? But I thought, those security agents thought, there's always a first time for every family. So technically, nobody is safe. The guy's eyes were blooded. And as you commended the Arise News journalist, I didn't know that Adefemi Akinsanya, has that depth of resolve within her, with, Okoyemi, and also, yes, that's Adefemi Akinsanya there, as she calls herself, But that was it. Holding her hand, trying to intimidate her. And she and the others, okay, that's Yusuf also there, they stood up for the right of the media, of journalists to do their work. And this is the beauty of journalism, the courage that people bring to the work in spite of the risks involved. And that's Shaitan Atigani also there,
And Yusuf all been manhandled.
Yes,
this is
that
disgusting.
Courageous, team of Arise News journalists who went there. They were intimidated last year. This year again, it has happened. That should never happen. Akim Odumusu, the commissioner for police, the commissioner of police in Lagos, eventually showed up. He apologized. He said those who had been arrested should be released. Okay, that was fine. But I thought he was responding basically to public outreach. Nobody should have been arrested in the first place. And then he gave an unintelligent explanation that the organizers told him that the protest will end at 10 a.m. and that the police had to intervene, after 10 a.m. No, that's absolutely unintelligent. And I hope at some point he will realize the folly of that kind of unintelligent explanation that he offered. Because clearly, as one reporter asked him, the reporter said, are you saying that, okay, even if you have reached an agreement with some other people, are you saying that other Nigerians don't have the right to also express themselves and come, forward to say that this is how we feel about Nigeria? So, well, the apology, some people will take it, but we need to point out the fact that in the first place, the police should not brutalize people and offer apologies later. All those people whose blood, were shed, was shed and all of that, how should they feel going forward? What should be the level of their faith in the Nigerian enterprise? However, there was another report that indicated that hoodlums infiltrated the process. One guy was shown carrying a machete. Okay, he didn't get a chance to use it, but the police cannot use that to say, well, this is what we're talking about. It's part of their work to keep the peace and to ensure that the situation does not degenerate. Has anybody's faith been strengthened in Nigeria after this? I doubt. The Minister of Information came forward. He's talking about how psychiatric evaluation will be carried out, how some of the grievances will be looked into. That looks like cheap talk. 1 year after. Couldn't we have done some of those things that the Minister of Information of the Federal Republic talked about before now to reassure the people?
A lot to unpack. Nigeria. All right, that's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, Michael Wilson, Adeso Omoro, and Aaron Akerjola will give us updates on global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Going on now to Global Business Update. Michael Wilson joins us from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Very good morning to you. Yeah, so Asia Pacific stocks then looking for direction today. Evergrande came back and tumbled on its return to trade. It's been away for about 2 weeks. Monitored shares of China Evergrande Group in Hong Kong. Actually, all that dropped. It really upset the markets today. They dropped by about 11% in Hong Kong. The debt-laden firm said yesterday that what it was going to do was sell about a 50.1% stake in its property services to another developer. That's actually fallen through, and the talk is that Evergrande is actually saying it will be unable to guarantee that it'll be able to reach its financial obligations any time soon. So that's going to be a continuing worry. Nikkei's down about 1%. I was going to bring you some news yesterday about Alibaba. I'll continue to do it. It's expanding its cloud business, new data centers in Asia, stepping up its rivalry with Amazon. I mean, all this is moving forward. I know that there's been big regulation in China as far as Alibaba's concerned, but it looks like Alibaba is emerging from that in different kind of ways. And on Tuesday, I was telling you it's launched this new chip as well that will go into servers, which it's called Panjiu, and the name is the aim of it is to give it some kind of artificial intelligence applications on Alibaba's cloud. As far as the US is concerned, setting new records yesterday. Stock futures are inching slightly lower today. We're going to get the weekly jobless figures out at lunchtime, which I'll be talking about later on in the Global Business Report. Dow futures down about 35 points, but really up yesterday. Tesla, we're right in this kind of middle of quarter three earnings, and Tesla has really bucked the chip shortage with record revenue, profit up at $1.6 billion for quarter two. That's its highest quarterly figure ever. I mean, it looks like Tesla's getting a bit more mainstream now. I would, however, point out two things to you. First of all, that if you want to replace a battery pack on some of the older models, it's worth checking about how much that actually costs. And also, the concept of driving electric vehicles in China, Singapore, and Indonesia, for example, where most of their electricity is generated from fossil fuels. Some little things you might want to think about before you actually go into that market. A lot of global panic around. What's happening is that because of the supply chains everywhere in the world, people are over ordering or placing orders too early, and that's kind of panicking things. So supply chains everywhere. You saw about those queues at petrol stations. That's what happens in this country. That's what happens with panic buying. It's happening globally, and of course that's because demand has been rocketing much harder up from the pandemic as economies have been reopening. The future of that, of course, is called into question, which we will explore a little bit maybe in the next few days as far as the UK is concerned. Bitcoin has jumped to a new high on the release of that US ETF launch. Again, it's now up at, I've got it at 66, I think. Let's checking. Yeah, 66,000. It was 64. It's its highest record in mid-April. And there's been some fairly bullish comments from a legendary trader apparently called Paul Tudor Jones. Never heard of him, but apparently it means something in the US. And he's also booted his sentiment. He's saying that he prefers Bitcoin as a hedge rather than gold. Good luck to him. Here's an important one. Now, we've got this COP26 conference coming up, which you know about, this climate change conference coming up beginning at the end of this month, beginning of November, for 12 days. A huge leak of documents has been sent to various news sources this morning saying that what governments are actually doing, like governments in Australia, Singapore, Saudi Arabia and Japan, are also raising questions about whether they actually do need to get to the targets that are being explored here. It's felt this, of course, is rather an important conference, given it's 6 years since the 2015 Paris Accord, which started off all these kind of targets. The UK has agreed a free trade deal with New Zealand. It won't turn much around. It's a tiny part of trade, and agriculture is a tiny part of the nation's GDP. But what it does point towards is maybe joining more agreements with the likes of Japan and Australia as well. So it's sort of a Pacific deal which is being which is being debated there. Naturally, the Farmers Union and also the Trades Union Congress here are saying that this is going to just cause a flood of cheap meats into the UK. Well, we'll see about that. I'm going to recap inflation. Did get a chance to talk to you yesterday. So it's cooling very, very slightly in the UK, but there's no question that the Bank of England, given that the governor was saying in inverted commas, it will have to act if inflation starts to rise there. The UK Asda, now the Issa brothers, this well-known, at least in this country, well-known internationally, taking over Asda, and they were trying to fold the Asda's petrol stations into their own petrol empire. Now, it's very detailed, all this. The reason I'm mentioning it is it just shows how difficult it is to move things around in an industry which is very competitive, as most are, and also with inflation worries as well. As far as oil's concerned, just onto commodities, it came under some kind of pressure. It's sort of reversing its losses this morning, but again, it's just sort of bubbling under that sort of price of just below $90 a barrel, and it's also a market which, as we know, is so what's going to happen, according to the traders I speak to, is that they're going to buy on the dips, just they do. And gold edging higher as the US dollar falls a little further. I mean, that's the kind of relationship it's having with the dollar right now. That's your global view this morning.
Things quickly. Inflation. The reason why inflation dipped to 3.1 in the month of August was because that scheme to encourage people to eat out is pretty much tapering out and the prices are starting to reflate. But that's not a general view of the economy, what is happening now. What's your say on that? And secondly, I'll talk about Evergrande. They tried to sell them up recently, 2.6 billion, the property arm of the group, but that's not working. Nobody wants to buy because of the debt profile. So what happens to them in the end? This is fast becoming another Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Okay, inflation in this country, yes, you're absolutely right. It's fairly patchy. Just noticing, we didn't get a chance to talk yesterday. I just thought I'd mention the fact that it's cooling off very, very slightly. But I think that most people feel as though the Bank of England is very much on the front foot about raising interest rates, probably towards the end of the year. So that's that, really. I mean, we can play around with the monthly figures, but the fact of the matter is that inflation is hitting every economy all the way around the world, and it's certainly hitting us in the UK. As far as Evergrande's concerned, I still feel as though, I mean, yes, it's got its problems. It's got massive problems. We're worried about the contagion over international markets and so on. I do feel that the Chinese authorities, given that the Chinese authorities are what they are, will try to come to the rescue of this by injecting money into it. They really want to save face because, as you yourself said about this, you know, you could fit the population of some of the smaller European countries into the empty properties that Evergrande now has. That's no way to run a property company. And it's certainly showing. I mean, if it's allowed to fail, I think that the ramifications of that, given that other banks around the world are involved in it, will be quite big. I suspect that China will not let that happen because it'll be an enormous loss of face to them. And that's one thing the Chinese authorities do not like.
Okay, I get the point you made about, China not allowing anything to fail, but the truth of the matter is that Evergrande has lost about 80% of its share value. In Hong Kong, 14% in the last 24 hours. But there's Upstream Development that wants to take over about 51% stake in that company. And the big question really, is what next? With the efforts to take it over, will it succeed? And then as regards New Zealand and the deal, by the trade deal with the United Kingdom, what really is in it for the United Kingdom? When it is very clear that the main trade deal that the United Kingdom needs is a deal with the United States. Is this all about joining the CPTPP? Is there any guarantee that it will help the UK to get into that alliance with Japan and Canada, perhaps?
I couldn't possibly predict which way geopolitical big tectonic plates are actually going to go at the moment. Yes, you're absolutely right. The New Zealand trade deal is paltry as far as the UK economy is concerned, but it's a stepping stone to bigger things. And I think you're absolutely right. Yes, certainly moving into the Trans-Pacific trade, which again in the future may be quite significant. It really depends what Japan wants to do, and of course it also depends on what China wants to do as well. I don't know how you predict those kind of things. We'll wait to see. As far as Evergrande's concerned, yeah. So the deal, the selling off deal, didn't work. As I say, I just repeat myself to say that I think the Chinese authorities will be looking at this very, very carefully indeed and weighing up whether they actually want to lose face over it, because it will be an enormous loss of face for their communist stroke capitalist system for this to fail. And I say the knock-on effects all the way around the world will add to the hostility against China, which of course, and we haven't even got to the bottom of the COVID outbreak yet in Wuhan. You know, there's still questions about that, and also we don't even know if China's actually coming to COP26. So all these things are actually hanging at the moment. I think there's a lot of bridge building to be done.
Right, yes, both Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin reportedly will not be there. Maybe remotely they'll join. Well, thank you, Mr. Wilson, for your time this morning. For an update on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesua Amora is here with us. Good morning, Adesua.
Good morning, Tundu. And Dr. Abati, this is Candy Apple Red. Good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Adesua.
Okay. Welcome to the color game.
Yes.
Sure.
Please register at the entrance.
Now, guys, while global infections of the COVID-19 are on a decline, Europe remains the only WHO region that continues to see an increase. If we can have the numbers from the Johns Hopkins University as at this morning, but I would give you a breakdown of what we've seen in the last week, according to the WHO's latest epidemiological report. Globally, there were about 2.7 million cases and more than 46,000 deaths last week. And that's slightly a decline from what we saw previously, the week before, rather. Now, as I said, Europe is the only region with COVID-19 cases on the rise, a 7% increase. Again, the countries with the most cases in the last week period under review are UK, Russia, and Turkey. The biggest drop in cases was seen in Africa and the Western Pacific region, where infections fell by 18% and 16% respectively. The number of deaths in Africa also declined by a quarter, despite the dire shortages of vaccines on the continent. And speaking of vaccines, about 6.6 billion doses have now been administered. The U.S. plans to start inoculating millions of children between the ages of 5 and 11. It also comes on a day the world's second largest populated country, India, announced that it has now administered 1 billion doses of the coronavirus vaccines. Here in Nigeria, very quickly, the NCDC is reporting 167 infections and 2 deaths from 9 states in the last 24 hours. A breakdown shows that Taraba State is reporting 109 cases. Footnote, the NCDC says this is a backlog from the 7th of this month. So those cases were between the 7th and the 20th of this month, coming from Taraba State, reporting 109 cases in the last 24 hours. Now, vaccination in Nigeria continues. 5.4 eligible people targeted have now received a dose of vaccine, while 2.7 million, or 2.5%, are now fully vaccinated. And since the last time I spoke to you guys, Kaduna State has joined the list of states in Nigeria issuing vaccine mandates for its public work first. Civil servants in the state are now expected to be vaccinated by the 31st of this month or be denied access to their offices. And this is good news. To help ensure that lower countries have equal access to what is being described as a game-changer oral drug when given regulatory approval, the Bill and Melinda Gates yesterday announced it will spend up to $120 million to purchase and to kickstart development of the generic versions of the Merck oral COVID-19 treatment. You recall that reports from trials, according to the drug maker, says the pill could slash the risk of hospitalization and deaths in high-risk people by half, by 50%. Though it has not been approved, as I said, wealthier countries, including the US, New New Zealand, Australia, the UK, South Korea, Singapore have all placed orders for supply. So you can imagine the race has already begun. And in Brazil, an investigation into the coronavirus response has pointed the finger of blame at guess who? The president himself, Jair Bolsonaro. The report also recommended that the president face criminal charges, including crimes against humanity. But I must say that the draft report still needs to be voted on by the Senate committee, although they do seem determined to get that passed. And finally, this morning, Kenya has lifted a nationwide curfew that has been in place since March last year to curb the spread of the coronavirus. President Uhuru Kenyatta made the announcement yesterday. He says the decision is based on the steady decline of infections and deaths in the country. Let me tell you that Kenya has reported over 250,000 coronavirus cases and lost 5,233 of its citizens to the virus. Guys.
Right, thank you, Ade. So I'm really interested to see what will happen in Brazil. That Senate report could not be more damning against Bolsonaro, effectively accusing him of mass murder. And the way their politics is structured is quite interesting because you have their equivalent of Senate President and Speaker from Bolsonaro's party. So I wonder if that will have any kind of influence on the outcome. We look forward to that. And isn't it really unfortunate what's happening in Europe with the increase in COVID cases, not just Europe, even Singapore. They have had their highest daily death toll so far in Singapore. When we thought that we'd be coming to the end of this pandemic now, even with booster jabs being administered a bit too slowly, it seems, we still have these cases. I mean, what exactly is the problem? Is it this new strain, that Delta new strain, or is it because everybody seems to have relaxed?
Tunde, I think it's a mix of that and even more. So we've seen countries who started inoculating early, they sort of relaxed, thinking they've got to the final point of the pandemic. So they relaxed and saw inbound travelers, their citizens were traveling around the world, bringing back new variants. And of course, vaccination has sort of plateaued in a lot of places. The vaccines are available in some countries, but the citizens are just not bothered. They don't want it. So we have that. And then we have cases where children are now driving the pandemic. And you recall that a lot of countries have not vaccinated, or not started vaccinating children in a certain age. And they do make up the population. They can also get infected. Even though they don't come down with the disease, they are potentially carriers. And so that's also driving those numbers.
Very quickly, first, let's start with Brazil. I think with the way that the president of Brazil has behaved, that's Jair Bolsonaro, he deserves to be indicted. That committee that was set up to investigate his role in the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic was set up by the Senate of Brazil in April. And now we have this 1,200-page report saying that the president should be indicted for inciting crime, for getting involved in crime, for, committing crimes against humanity, and also for abuse of funds. And it's not alone. Two of his sons are also involved in this matter. Many of his allies have also been indicted for putting the life of, the lives of Brazilians at risk. And there's very copious evidence about, President Bolsonaro's vaccine hesitancy and the many steps that he took to discourage science. He regarded COVID-19 as nothing more than just a flu. He even went to the United Nations General Assembly unvaccinated. So the evidence is out there in the full view of the international community. But the question is, when the Senate decides to consider that report, or when it does, on October 26, will it receive the endorsement of the majority of the House? Two, the Constitution of Brazil, in circumstances like this, gives powers to the Prosecutor General, who is an appointee of President Bolsonaro, to move forward with it. Okay, would that happen? Will the Prosecutor General go ahead? President Bolsonaro himself has said this is all about politics. So for now, whatever has been achieved with this report is simply the fact that at least in one country, the lawmakers have been able to do a report, to collect evidence, to say that their president has been acting irresponsibly with regard to what is a global public health responsibility. Now, as for Gates Foundation, I think Gates Foundation should be commended. At the beginning of this narrative about COVID-19, Bill and Melinda Gates, or Bill Gates specifically, they were accused of promoting some kind of conspiracy against humanity. But the truth of the matter is that the Gates Foundation had consistently invested in promoting global health. They run a center, they support a center for epidemic preparedness in the world. And now, this particular drug that has been developed by Merck, I think that's the name, Merck, one of the major global pharmaceutical companies. The drug is called Molnupiravir. Molnupiravir, that's the name of the drug.
Yes.
And the UK, Sajid Javid, when he was in the House of Commons yesterday, giving an address on the situation with the pandemic, said the UK has ordered 730,000 doses of Molnupiravir, and the expectation is that when this antiviral drug arrives and when it receives the necessary regulatory approvals, we'll have, particularly now that some parts of the world face what we call the twindemic, which is a combination of the virus and also the flu. And people in the UK are already being asked to call to 2 arms. So one COVID-19 jab here, if it is a booster shot, and another one here for the flu. So it's a major advancement, and we hope that the pill will work eventually, and maybe that will also help lower and middle-income countries that may not have the resources to buy, the vaccine at high premium.
All right, a lot to say about Jair Bolsonaro, but we need to go. It might just be another Lavajato moment for him. Hopefully he gets hit real hard as regards what he did in Brazil. But thank you so much for your time.